into this underclass structure, first of all, are the legacies of slavery and Jim Crowism. We're still bearing the burdens and the scars. They were never corrected. That's one of the failings of our leadership in this country. They had the nerve, the audacity to let black folks suffer for 460 years. And at the end of the civil rights movement, rather than going back and saying, let's find out what has happened to black folk for 460 years. Have they been psychologically, emotionally, politically, educationally damaged? Nobody spent 1 minute of time trying to figure out what had happened to black folk over all that period of time.
Stop it right there. Because he started off by talking about black people being basically conditioned into a permanent underclass. White America has always placed themselves over black America. White people have always lived and existed and thought as black people as second class citizens. Statistically and economically, we're operating on the third class citizen level. So one of the things that Dr. Claude Anderson has been talking about for the last 40, 50 years is if black people, we don't get our stuff together economically, as well as a group of people who are operating together, that we're going to, like he started off saying, we're going to be socialized into a permanent underclass. He also talked about the Hispanic population passing the black population. I don't think he says it in this, but he talked about the Hispanic population passing the black population in numbers, and the Hispanic population have passed us. And we're going to be able to look at some numbers later on to kind of see economically where we stand. But when you talk about black people being socialized into an underclass, and then all of the trauma and everything that we've talked about in previous breakdowns, especially with Dr. Francis Cress Welsing and Dr. Joy DeGroot, talking about all the trauma that black people have experienced. So all this is going on, unchecked trauma, unhealed trauma. And this is, I guess, it's presenting itself in inappropriate behavior, how we carrying ourselves, how we operating as a group, how we operating as individuals within ourselves and with other groups. And the outcome hasn't been favorable because our society, our communities are declining, our families are in a constant decline, and economically we're not doing good.
Yeah, I would also like to add that it's actually, in terms of what I'm about to say, it's worse than he presents, because he says nobody spent one iota of time trying to figure out what the effects of slavery have been. And that's actually not true. There have been a number of government mandates, federal government mandates, congressional panels, a number of other things just in the past 10 years or so that have been put out there and put together to try to figure out the long-term effects of slavery. The what makes it worse is, even with all of this information, not to mention the independent scholars and the independent black historians that have gone out and taken it upon themselves to produce this information, there's still no political willpower to do anything about it.
Right.
So there is, at this point, I would say a extensive, but definitely a growing body of knowledge and body of work that talks about what the long-term implications of slavery has been. There's just nobody doing anything about it.
Right. Now, let me ask you, because you said the studies that have been put out to show what happened to black people during slavery. You say those happened within the last 10 years?
There have been, I'm thinking particularly when they started talking about the reparations. This was maybe 4 or 5 years ago when reparations really caught on. Back when Ta-Nehisi Coates wrote his piece on it in the Atlantic. They actually put together a panel that year. Congress put together a congressional panel that year filled with scholars and activists and whatnot to look at what the long-term ramifications of slavery had been, and ways that reparations needed to be made to make amends for those dangers. And it's not just that panel. There was a panel, I want to say 2 or 3 years before that. That was a congressional panel. And there was a panel maybe 4 or 5 years before that. That was, again, another congressionally put together panel specifically to address slavery in America for Black people.
Okay, so I believe this lecture was given before that. So at that time,
No,
I just want to put the context just for because you already know.
No,
So,
right.
So put context at that time. Dr. Anderson was true, but now where we speak here in 2022, that's not true anymore because studies have been put out to show what has happened to us.
So So let me say it now out of my own mouth. When Dr. Claude Anderson first started pumping his message, and he's had the same message for 40, 50 years.
Right.
When he first started pumping his message, the statement he made was true.
Right.
There was nobody that had any level of prominence, anyways, any level of notoriety or a platform of any measurable size that had done this kind of research. But since he said this, in the last 10 years or so, there have been a number of congressional panels put together to study this issue. We good? Are we good?
Right. But
it don't matter. They're gonna launch off anyways.
Hey, but all of that has to be taken into account and taken into context of what happened to Black people and why we behave the way we behave. Because as you can see, every week we have to talk about that, why we behave the way we behave. So like you said, lately, as of within, let's just give it within the last 10 years, panels have been put together to examine what happened to Black people, but nothing still has been put into place to correct what has happened to Black people.
Right, and let me clarify. Let me say this about these panels. Two of those panels that were put together, I'm not even aware of whether or not they actually put out any return. I just know that the panels were put together.
Right.
And for the last panel, it did put out a return, but there was no action taken on the suggestions made by the panel.
So, but on the other end of that, there's nothing stopping us as Black people from examining on a wide scale level what has happened to us. There's nothing stopping us from putting our own panels together, because we do have factions of people and individuals who have put together information, who have gathered information to examine and to study and to let us know what happened to Black people. But on that large scale, it hasn't been put together like that. But there's nothing stopping us. So those are things that we can do. Yes, it's been examined on the individual level, and yes, we should be examining ourselves on the individual level. But from the scale that we're talking about, to be able to move forward, especially for us to operate as a group better so our economics can improve, that hasn't been done. But nothing's stopping us from doing it.
Right. And for those of us that are doing it, or those of you that might be listening to this and might be thinking about doing it, it would be in your best interest for your mental health and your future outlook to try to think of solutions to the problems that you find that the Black community can implement on its own.
And hey, email us. Go email us. We could talk. If you thinking of solutions, that's the whole thing. It is we need to get together and put our minds together. So if you have ideas and solutions, email us. On the shoulders, the number one, on the shoulders one @gmail.com. Email us. We can talk about it. Let's put our minds together. But that's the whole thing of doing these breakdowns, so we can come up with actual solutions for what we're doing. Gonna make sure we say that every week, so we know we're doing this to think of solutions. Because we go back and watch these videos. I go back and watch these videos and sit down and think and take notes and say, okay, how can we do this, this, and this, and this, so we can incorporate these things into our daily lives as individuals and as a group. So yes, that's where we are. So let's keep going.
So in the course of the civil rights movement, at the end of it, they say, well, let's pretend that nothing has happened to them, that they were not injured, they were not hurt. And now let's go seek integration and pretend that we're all equal. Now, that was grossly unfair, because by that point in time, and by the 1966 period, whites had become economic giants in America. They owned and controlled everything at that point in time. Black folk didn't own anything. Whites control almost 100% of all the wealth, the income, the privileges, the businesses, the resources, and all levels of government. Blacks had nothing. Blacks were 1-foot midgets. And they allowed us then to use integration to walk from our communities, from our ghettos over in their communities, totally disarmed, not understanding anything, blind, naked, and then saying that you can go and compete. Compete with what?
Stop right there. We talk about a lot how integration did not help the Black community in the long run. And that's one of the things he's talking about. Black people barely owning one half or 1% of the wealth in America before integration. And then we integrate into white America, who own most of the wealth in the country. We give up our own and integrate into theirs, and have been fighting ever since to fit in while neglecting our own. And then we come back now we come back in 2022 talking about closing the wealth gap. But it's like we're supposed to close the wealth gap. It's like fighting somebody with both of our hands and both of our feet, and our hands bound, our feet bound, and we're blindfolded, and we're supposed to fight this person and win this fight. But we're at a great disadvantage. And one of the reasons we're at a great disadvantage is we gave up a lot of our leverage, and we gave up a lot of our wealth looking to integrate into white America. We can all look at our own cities. We can all look at the cities, the Black communities and Black cities within the states and the areas that we live in, and see some of the remnants and hear the stories of what they used to be before integration. And you can't be a group of people who barely own any wealth, who choose to give up the little that you do own to be a part of the masses, and then you have no real outcome. Because I said before, I said again, we pretty much depended upon white America for our survival, because we as a whole, we own literally nothing. There are individuals who have things, but that don't account when especially racism is a team sport. So, all right, you the person on the team who out there balling, but we losing every game. It don't count for nothing. Your stat sheet look good, but you ain't gonna never get to reach the heights that you need to reach, because the team itself isn't together. The team ain't winning.
Yeah. And what he's saying is still true today.
It's too true. That's the sad part.
White people still own over 95% of all the wealth in America, according to the last Federal Finance Consumer Report that I looked at. And so there are two things I want to address here, because you talked about integration, and I think integration is so key, and we've been having this conversation for a long time now, and I still am amazed at the way people use certain terminology. Integration would have been great if that had been what we did, but we didn't integrate, we assimilated. And when you read the historical textbooks written by white scholars, not all of them, but a good chunk of them that I've read anyways, they don't speak about integration. They speak about assimilation being the goal. Integration is something that was thrown out to make it look and feel better. But integration is what happens when you make room for something else inside of something. You make room for that thing to continue to be whatever it is in all its uniqueness inside of whatever the larger thing is that it's going to become a part of. Assimilation is when you take something that's foreign and you make it just like what you are. And that's essentially what happened. We had to give up everything. Well, we didn't have to. We chose to give up everything in order to become a part of something. And so with that frame of reference, with that perspective in mind, of course we lost everything, because integration was never the goal. Assimilation was for them. Integration was for us. Assimilation was for them. They got what they wanted and then just told us that we got what we wanted.
Yeah.
And so the other piece of that is comparatively speaking, we're still a 1 foot midget, and that's what we're gonna be. All right, white people have had too much of a head start for us to start comparing and competing with them. But one thing we can do is use the resources we get to better ourselves and make things, not even close the gap, but make things better for us internally in whatever ways we can. Using the means that we have available to us. At this point, trying to compare to white people would be like you trying to work on your hops so that you could win a jump ball with Prime Shaq. He's just too tall. It's too much advantage there. But you can work on your hops so that you can jump higher than you could 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.